When you say the date, October 31st, most people think of Halloween. But that date is also famous for the birth of Bitcoin. And today we'll show you how this revolutionary digital currency can give you the power to end fake news and incentivize the truth.
You're listening to the Ovis Podcast with Tracy Grant.
Welcome, everyone, to the Ovis Podcast. I'm Tracy Grant, the chief correspondent for Ovis, the only place that empowers everyday people to end fake news by rewarding those who tell the truth and holding those who lie accountable. October 31st, 2008, Halloween. That's the day the world's first cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, was born. According to Wikipedia, the person who created the Bitcoin white paper went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. This photo is not a real picture of him. In fact, many people refer to Bitcoin's founder as a ghost because nobody really knows who he is. But the technology that he created has power to restore public trust in the news media. A September 2022 Gallup poll showed that only 7% of Americans have a great deal of trust in the media. That's one of the lowest ratings on record. In today's Ovis podcast, we sit down with Gil Bindleglass and Mark Schwartz. Mark and Gil have been studying blockchain technology for the past decade. They now serve on the Ovis Advisory Board. Ovis founder Linton Johnson recently interviewed them to discuss how the technology behind Bitcoin can restore the public's faith in the news media.
How frustrated are you with the news, Gil? And then Mark.
I'm going to speak for Mark. I don't think he watches the news.
Or reads it. You can read the news too.
I'm less of a news junkie now than I used to be, primarily because I focus on things like crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin and things that I can actually try to impact or most of the events that we watch on the news, we can't really impact. But yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see the arrows slinging. It's frustrating to see the biases. It's frustrating to see just the lack of. I don't even think there's an effort on most major news organizations to tell the truth. It's just about a narrative. There's not about, gone are the days where maybe they were never there.
They were never there.
If you ask Mark, they were never there.
Yeah.
But, people are out for their narrative. They know the narrative they want. They try to shoehorn the events and the facts to fit that narrative. And hopefully with Ovis, we can overcome that.
And Mark, what are your thoughts? You don't apparently watch the news or read it much. Is it because you're just done with it?
Yeah. I try to live an invention of best self out of best imagination. And what's in the news, in the media, what's in history books is probably not accurately described. Yeah. And it's making me better. If something improves me, whether it's an idea, a person, or a food, I bring it closer. If it's not going to improve me, I don't go near it.
Is that the reason why you joined this project? Get it off the ground because this might improve you?
I joined this project for the following reason. Even before Bitcoin, my mission and purpose, as I invented it to be, is to find highest vibration and vibrate higher, to align actuality to greatest potentiality, to create the best version of myself and my identity out of my best imagination. And I wish the same for others to an even greater degree. When Bitcoin showed up, I examined it. I worked hard to understand how the technology works. It took me a long time. I worked hard to understand how the economics works. And I came to the conclusion that Bitcoin achieves what I just said. I also came to the conclusion that Bitcoin is this revolution. As I met you, Linton, in the last crypto bear market. It was a lonely, scary, uncertain, quiet time in crypto. Bitcoin had crashed from $19,000 to $3,000. I met you. We were introduced by a wonderful team, and you came up with the idea of applying Bitcoin's technology to the media, and we had some wonderful conversations. And I came to the conclusion that your vision aligns with what my purpose is to create best life out of best imagination, align actuality to greatest potentiality, find highest vibration and vibrate higher for myself and for others. That's why I participated in Ovis up to now. And in any way I can contribute, I do contribute.
Well, so my question to both of you all is, Bitcoin has changed the world, and Bitcoin is more than just a cryptocurrency. For those who aren't familiar with Bitcoin, it's also a blockchain. It is the blockchain, right? Tell us how blockchain and Bitcoin has changed the world.
So Bitcoin signifies three elements that constitute experiences that humans have never had. The first is, it's the first time in human history that an asset and a ledger are inextricably intertwined. An asset like the dollar or gold or stocks, and a ledger like, a bank ledger. They're all one and the same. The second way in which Bitcoin is unprecedented is Alice can transfer wealth to Bob, and everyone can come together, including Alice and Bob, and agree with certainty that Alice used to have this much wealth and she transferred that amount of wealth to Bob. That happened. Up to now in human history, we've had ledgers and Alice can transfer wealth to Bob, but you can't be certain as to the ledger's reflection of what happened. There's all kinds of problems we've had with ledgers in human history, where ledgers can get hacked even before software. There could be a fat finger error. There could be nefarious activity. The government could come and shut down the ledger or change the ledger. So whenever I see a ledger, whether it's in ancient Babylonia, or ancient Babylon, or now with Citibank, I can't be sure to a certainty if Alice transferred that wealth to Bob as represented on the ledger. With Bitcoin, anyone in the Bitcoin community can take a look and have certainty that that happened. The third way in which Bitcoin sets a precedent is the amount of total assets that exist can be known to a certainty. So think about gold or dollars or stocks, right? You can't know to a certainty how many there are. And even if you could, which you can't, anyone could come and expand the supply, right? Certainly with stocks and dollars. With Bitcoin, you can know with precision how many Bitcoin ever existed at any point in the past, how many Bitcoin exist right now, and how many Bitcoin will exist at any point in the future. There's no asset in human history that's ever existed where you can know those three things about the assets, amount, and supply.
And you can't change the supply. So, just like with the dollars, not only do you not know how many dollars are in existence or in circulation, but whatever it is, it doesn't matter, because they can change that tomorrow.
One of the things that you like to say is that if you look at the world today, it is completely unrecognizable as compared to the 90s when the internet came out. Do you think the world is going to be completely unrecognizable because of blockchain in about 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, it's tough. Getting old sucks, because now teenagers and 20-somethings make fun of my life back in 1985 and 1995, largely because they have technologies at their fingertips that we didn't have. So we had to get a taxi. They just punch their phone and they get an Uber. I had to do it the hard way and go to a bar and ask someone for their phone number. They just swipe right, swipe left. Okay, so on and so forth. Imagine those kids being 50 years old and 60 years old in just a few decades, being laughed at by someone who grew up natively on Bitcoin and natively on cryptocurrency, natively on a journalism and media paradigm where anything you hear in the news is accurate, trustworthy, verifiable. You don't have to have a fight with somebody about whether or not something happened, when it happened, how it happened. It's all on the blockchain.
I mean, when we look at the news media, and Linton, you could describe what I'm going to say better than I can, but the media has a very low popularity level. Why? Because of the inaccuracies, because of the biases, because of the lack of objectivity. And without this technology, it would go on, like the legacy system would go on, the legacy media would continue. And now with Ovis and this technology, we have an opportunity to, as Mark said, to create accurate, verifiable, truthful news and information. And while that seems innovative now, and it's like mind-boggling now, hopefully in a decade or so, there will be other problems that need to be addressed, but that won't be one of them.
So what do you think the birth of Bitcoin can mean for the news? You're talking about how it's trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable. How do you translate to news? How do you use blockchain technology to make the news trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable?
Well, I'll restate the result, and then I'll get into the how. The result is, before this technology, we're stuck in what Mark Twain would say is, if I don't read the newspaper, I'm uninformed. If I do read the newspaper, I'm misinformed. After blockchain, it's if I read the newspaper, I'm informed. Whatever is in the news is, as represented in the news, is accurate, is trustworthy and verifiable, and it reflects what actually happened. Okay, how do we get there? You're looking at a different hierarchical structure where in the existing hierarchy, in the existing media, news, ABC, Wall Street Journal, the hierarchy is pyramid shaped, and it comes to an apex where there's a central concentration of control as to what is told when and how. The organization and architecture of blockchain on the news is flat. There is no pyramid, no hierarchy. It's flat and decentralized. It's more like a hive of bees. And every actor in the network has a voice to play, has a role to play in verifying whether or not a proffered piece of information is accurate, trustworthy, and verifiable. So the community will come to consensus.
Just much like, they come to consensus on a transaction, like Mark was talking about earlier, between Alice to Bob. Now they can come to consensus in a decentralized way, where there's no authority that is, subject to a bias, and they come to consensus over, what happened in Ukraine or what happened in, wherever.
Well, one thing I find interesting about blockchain technology and the decentralization, value, I guess, that's kind of built into blockchain, is that it allows people to get their power back. I mean, right now, especially when it comes to news, it's a few decision makers determining everything that we see and hear. I think it's like 6 major media corporations control virtually everything that we see and hear, which means they have an enormous amount of power. But with blockchain, we can take that power away and return it back to the people. How do you think, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people will be interacting with the news, being able to use that power to ensure trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable information?
I think the first thing it's going to do is save people a lot of time in their day. So right now, a lot of someone's day is devoted to walking around with a certain perspective on how events unfold in the Ukraine. And so they get in this fight. On the other side of this technology revolution, both parties have acquired information as to what happened in Ukraine. It's consistent with what actually happened. And whatever conversation they want to have about Ukraine can now start from that consensus, and they can go and invent great ideas. They can go and get a manicure. They can go and do some push-ups and get in shape. But what they won't do is get into a spat neither online nor in real life, over whose belief system of previous events is going to prevail. I think it's just going to cut out a lot of garbage time in people's lives. And I think it's going to reorient people toward better physical and mental health. I mean, it's just toxic out there to whether it's Starbucks or you're on Twitter or you're listening to NBC News. You're inevitably going to come across an opinion that you disagree with. Not an opinion about how things should be, but an opinion as to what actually happened somewhere in the past. And I think history books will be written correctly for the first time. Newspapers will be written correctly for the first time. People can get on with their day.
That sounds like a utopia to me. And I guess blockchain can be the conduit that allows for that. I want to kind of close out by talking about the news itself. The incentivizing of the truth. That's something that is kind of core to Ovis's ethos. And that is moving away from this ratings and clicks business model, which incentivizes ratings and clicks, but not the truth. And then using blockchain technology to incentivize the one thing that we're all after, and that is truth telling. How, in your mind, do you see that working with Ovis?
In the Ovis construct, the actors are incentivized not only to tell the truth because they'll be rewarded, but then if they don't tell the truth, then they can be penalized in some way.
Well, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to both of you all for being here and helping advise us and giving your thoughts and perspectives for Ovis. I think we've come so far because of you two and your input. So I appreciate you being on the team. We are going to do this, and we're going to do it really well, and we're going to change the world together. And then we're going to turn this entire project over to the people because, as I like to say, what we're going to do is try to completely decentralize it, which means I got to be taken out of the equation and it runs itself in a decentralized, autonomous way. So my mantra is the community needs to rise up and fire Linton. But I think ultimately what that does is it really truly allows complete decentralization of decision-making and turns the power completely over to the people. And it makes the news uncorruptible because there's so many people involved that, people can't take advantage of certain folks and try to alter the narrative. So that's ultimately the goal. And I think for me, the reason why I love this blockchain technology so much is because it is the first time in human history that we can do something about fake news and misinformation. It's the first time in history that we can take back the truth. We can restore what the internet destroyed, and that is the truth.
I'm an Ovis fan. The revolution will be tokenized.
The revolution will be tokenized. All right. With that, thank you both very much. The birth of Bitcoin and how it's going to change the world of news. Back to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Linton. That does it for us on the Ovis podcast. Please like and subscribe to our social media channels by visiting ovisnews.com. It's also where you can join the movement to end fake news by incentivizing the truth. I'm Tracy Grant. Thanks for watching.